Hey, right. Welcome everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whichever time it is for you. I'm Joe from Family Based Solution, my colleague Ayse. So we're a not-for-profit organisation in London. Um, so we work predominantly around domestic abuse, so supporting parent carers who are abused by their children from aged 6 to 19. Um, Families recovering from domestic abuse. So once the perpetrators left the home, we support the family to rebuild relationships, make sense of what they've been through. Um, and we also do work with adult perpetrators, and that's really to try and replace harmful behaviors with more positive behaviors so that hopefully the next relationship they go into, those children um, and partners won't have to go through that. Ultimately, our aim is to end, which is often an intergenerational cycle of abuse. Uh, and yeah, I mean, it's easier said than done, obviously. We work with a whole family. We're very solution focused practitioners. Um, We also do, well, which is why you're here, hopefully, is solution focused workshops with the parents and carers. Um, we introduced this during the pandemic. We did it online so that parents could join from wherever they were, really. So we were finding parents joining not just from where we are, but from Europe, as far away as New Zealand, which was really, really nice to see. And we continued that doing them online. So we offer a morning session and an evening session so that working parents are not penalized for being at work, so that they can join in the evenings. Um, and initially brought it in to reduce waiting times because we work with the whole family, and generally the whole family and the child were only free in the evenings. It restricted the amount of hours we could actually do any meaningful work. So by having the groups, it was really useful because they could join those online groups virtually straight away. There was no wait time for that. So they would come in and get in support at a moment of crisis and when they needed it the most. Um, what was also really useful about this was that child to parent abuse holds a lot of stigma. Yeah, for a parent to have to acknowledge or tell anyone outside the family that this is what's happening to me, it's very, very difficult to deal with. Um, if you're being abused by a 12 or a 13-year-old, you can't just throw them out on the street. It just doesn't work that way. So it was really useful for parents to be able to be within a group situation where they didn't feel that so isolated and stigmatized. Because often what was happening was even the supportive wider family were moving away because it was like it was too much for them to cope with as well. So the isolation felt by these parent carers was really strong. So for them to be able to get together and realize that they're not alone, that it's not just me, was really powerful for them. Um, Reduce the wait times. Um, and it was really about teaching them how to have solution focused conversations with their children. Um, and they would run for 4 weeks. And generally, what we found was that when they started to have those different conversations with their children over that period of time, they may not have needed the family work because it wasn't either or. Everyone could join the support groups and have ongoing family work if they felt they needed it. Um, so what was really useful about running these sessions is often the parents would say, actually, we got what we needed from those 4 sessions. And that was, again, another way of reducing the waiting list. But it also meant that the families where the crisis was entrenched and deepened were getting the support earlier, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So that was kind of the rationale behind it. Um, and they're going really, really well. We run them, like I say, every 4 weeks, and there's no waiting times for the families. And some families will opt to go for another 4 sessions because they like actually they start to give back. They start to run some of the sessions in some cases when they're confident enough. So someone with lived experiences actually can run those sessions, which again is a really powerful thing for other parents to hear from another person that's been through it. Have I said that? Is that all right, Ayse? You've given me a look. Cool.
No. Yeah, you touched upon everything I was going to say. Great. Yeah, it's done. So the sessions are for an hour and a half each, hour and a half at a time for 4 weeks, and that is plenty. And when parents join, they usually have their cameras off. They can have alias names, and if they choose to have alias names, I usually give them a superhero name. Just to have a bit of a laugh and a giggle, because that whole essence of the workshops is to make sure that the parents are leaving with a massive smile on their faces. I want them to laugh as much as they possibly can, because it's all about recreating them as human beings and with the parent hat on. And there's a difference, and we do a lot of talk about that. Who are you and who are you as a parent? We do a lot of talk about masking. We do a lot of talk about hats. And which they start to kind of grasp by session 2. Session 1 is all about them. I explain to them that this is your session, and I actually don't plan these sessions. And I haven't even planned this one. I do not plan my sessions because I go where the client leads me. And as a group, when they're sitting there and I'm observing their body language, I'm looking at them and I'm feeling it, and they're asking me questions, I think, right, this is the direction we're going to take this week. And every week is very much based on what their needs are. So no planning happens. But what I definitely do is I give them 20 minutes in breakout rooms in groups of 2s or 3 to talk about the challenges that they are facing, because that's the only way that they're going to see that other people are going through something similar. That also gives them the opportunity to give each other some advice. And have you tried this? And to start connecting. So, so when they are working together during the 4 weeks, there is a lovely professional connection. Because when they enter the room the first week, I say, you are not here as a parent. You're going to be trained. So the emotion, and I explain the difference between emotion and feeling more logic and being more logical. So I ask them to remove their parent hat and listen to me with the intent of learning how to use solution-focused language. But you're going to use your families as case studies. So they can still use their family. They're still getting a lot out of it. But I want them to think with a logical mind when they're focusing on me, when I'm talking about exceptions, what this is, and all the assumptions of the solution-focused world that we know it. And I do a lot of talk, and at this part, I'm going to start blushing because Martin Buckley is in the room, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm like, I talk about the brain. And in the first week, I also talk about the brain. And the reason why I talk about the brain is so they have an understanding of what might be happening to their children. Because a lot of the parents would have been through some form of trauma. And a lot of the kids are displaying unwanted behaviors because they have secondary trauma. Or first-hand trauma, secondary anxiety or first-hand anxiety. And we talk a lot about modeling. So the way that I talk about that is I start off with, years ago, we all had to use our brains all the time. You would receive one piece of homework and you'd have to go to the library and you would have to study, look at referencing, write an essay, take it to your teacher. Your teacher would get a green or red pen and just muller the essay and say this, and you'd have to rewrite it again. So whether you liked it or not, you had to use your brain. Now what do? We Google it. Or we look at AI. So even though there are differences between the parents and their parents, technology-wise, it's not that different. There are advancements, but not the huge advancement as we see to the next generation, to our children. So we start talking about children not being able to cope with stress because they're not natural problem solvers anymore. They're not as resilient as we are because there's always someone to talk to. When we were at school, did we have anyone really to talk to? Did we have mentors? or school counselors on tap. So we do a lot of that talk to make them, help the parents realize that actually there is a huge difference in generation and that they're not using their brains as much. Does that make sense so far? Then I start talking about, this is session 1, I start talking about our brains being made up. This is where Martin Buckley is going to come in and say, I don't think so. Our brains are made up of lots and lots and lots of filing cabinets, thousands of them, thousands. And some are pushed to the back. And some are right here because they're the ones that we refer to all the time. So when we ask them certain questions, they have to really think about, I don't know the answer, but actually you do. You are the expert in yourself. You just need to utilize a little person, the manager of the filing cabinets in your brain, to find the answer. So you might have to dig deep into the filing cabinets at the back of your brain. So in essence, what we're doing is blaming the brain, not the person. That's how it comes across to them. So when we start talking about the children's filing cabinets and what that looks like and their prefrontal lobe and the behaviors that they're displaying and how parents are modeling behaviors, that's when we start doing the actual work. Parents are not good, majority, at modeling certain behaviors. Parents that have been through trauma are in survival mode. So when I asked a group of parents last night, to think about their strengths as a human being, as opposed to their strengths as a person, they really struggled. Really, really struggled. So we give them time and we put them in a breakout room to think together and to try and encourage each other and teach them how to ask follow-up questions, sorry, when one of them does come up with a strength. Because without realizing, they then start using all of that language with their own children. Without even realizing, they start to do it. Any questions so far? Cool. So in essence, it's all about training. So I don't use a PowerPoint. Again, like I said, I don't plan for anything. The parents will tell me about their week, and the way they'll tell me about their week each week is, what challenge did you face and how did you overcome it? Because we cannot beat around the bush. We cannot be all airy-fairy and expect everything to be great. Because the reality is that they've either just left an abusive relationship, or they have a high anxiety, or their child is beating them. So we need to give them the space for them to express it. What challenge did you face, but how did you overcome it? And looking back at it, what could you have done differently? Then we start to explore all the exceptions, and we also start to explore all the things that went well and how they influenced their children's behavior and what that looked like. So they work really, really, really hard. A lot of them complain that they have a headache by the end of it because they're using parts of their brains that they just dismissed for so long. Martin's like, doesn't work like that. It does in my session, Martin. Okay, it does. Whatever I say in the workshop is gospel, is true. Okay. Unmute.
No, I'm fascinated by that. I'm not skeptical at all.
Yeah. But this little person in the brain, which every parent will name, Mark or whatever it might be, this little person in the brain is a person that organizes the filing cabinet. So we look at, what is Martin doing? I'm going to call it Martin. What is Martin already doing well? How do we know what Martin is doing working? What evidence do we have of that? And what do we want to train Martin to be able to do? Because Martin sometimes gets really tired. Martin can be really tired because Martin has to juggle work, home, abusive child, past traumas, blah, 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 blah. So Martin gets really tired. How can we help Martin relax? Because as soon as I say to the parents, do you take time out for yourself, for your mental well-being? They're like, I don't have time for that. I don't do this. And there's a massive block. But as soon as I say that little person in your brain needs a bit of time, and I start to draw on the board, on the interactive whiteboard, that it just does this from one filing cabinet to another. And it's, I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and da, 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 da. Martin needs to rest. Otherwise, Martin feels very anxious. And when Martin's feeling very anxious, what might happen? And then they start to give me a list. So in essence, I'm teaching the parents to use solution focus to retrain their brain in order for them to then influence their children's behavior, because they cannot change their children's behavior, they can only influence it. So they need to find their own strengths in order for them to be able to influence their children. How do you know what you're doing is working? So one parent a week will present a challenge that they faced, and we will use that in front of me rather than in the breakout room. And we'll use that as a really good case study where all the parents have to use solution-focused language to support that parent in helping them overcome that challenge that they are facing. And they will use scaling questions. They will use the miracle day, but we call it when you're at your best. So if you were to manage that situation, go back to that situation, but this time you were at your best, how might you have handled that differently? And the parents are all taught how to use this language. By week 4, they are delivering to each other. They are talking about what their best hopes are, their new best hopes after we established that in week 1, but then we go back to what their best hopes are after this training, what their best hopes are, and breaking down exactly what they're going to do to achieve that. So a step by step, and what that step by step looks like, but they actually ask each other. I don't ask them. So they SF each other. Going back to week 1, week 2, I teach them how to use solution-focused language by using a silent session with them. So I will guide them through a silent session. So I will ask all the solution-focused questions, and they'll just sit there in a relaxed state and think of the answers. So what are your best hopes? And they'll just think, and I won't know their answer. And I do that for about 15 minutes with them. And in their own mind, they explore challenges. What might stop you from reaching the next number on the scale? And how can you overcome that? Knowing that might happen, how could you plan ahead? Because life will have challenges. They might be ready to do something different at home, but that child may come home and be very, very abusive that day. So following the plan that they created will not be realistic. So asking them realistically, what challenges might you face moving from 4 to a 5? Let's explore the challenges. How would you overcome it? Plan from now. So if it happens, your little person in the brain already knows which filing cabinet to go into and draw out that resource because it's pre-planned, and it will know what to do. So that little person in the brain plays a huge part in the 4 sessions that we're delivering. What do you want that person to be able to do? Right? So I'm going to ask you a question that I asked the parents. And I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and you're going to explore it. Is that okay? You sure? Martin's like, not another breakout room. I always pick on someone, Martin, and you're to my left and it's going to be you.
I'm still offended that it's Jonah, the one you're going to leave your husband for.
Well, you know, might have a list. So if you don't have children, my apologies, please use a niece or a nephew or a client or somebody. But what is it about you that, what strengths are you already using with your children that they have picked up on and using themselves? So how have you inspired your children with your own strengths? And I'm only going to give you guys, hold on. That's fine. So how have you inspired your children with your own strengths? I'm going to give you guys like 6 minutes.
If I showed I showed that sort of patience with my boys when they'd probably be maths professors by now. But it's that emotional connection. You can't help yourself. And sometimes it's just don't beat yourself up over it. Just try and imagine that this is your niece or your nephew. Because how often do our children say to us, so and so's parents are so much cooler than you? Or they told me to do this. Yeah, but I've been telling you that for months and you haven't taken a blind bit of notice. It's the way we put in this information. Plus sometimes it just
So session 2, I do usually touch upon listening to understand rather than listening to respond, and what that looks like, and how we listen differently to our own children to maybe someone else's child.
Mm.
And I will use the example of, if your niece came to you with a problem and it would be something maybe uncomfortable, how would you give yourself to that person? How would that person know that you are listening? And they would give me a list, a very, very long list. But if your child came to you with the exact same problem, what would your child be seeing? And it's always different, because there's a massive emotional attachment there, and fear kicks in because they want to protect their children. So listen to your children as if you are talking to someone else's child. And let's see what difference that makes. And that is their homework task. Because if someone else's child was to say to you, I really need to talk to you right now, you would stop what you are doing and say, well, what's happened, sweetheart? But when you are busy washing the dishes and you've got to do this and you've got to do this and you've had a whole day at work and they say, Mum, I really want to talk to you. Not now. You can see I'm busy. You always find the wrong moment, blah, 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 blah. And I will act this all out to the parents and do it exactly the way I'm presenting it now. And they just laugh, but they're like, it's so true. Like, when was the last time your child wanted your attention and you said no? And they can give you a list. So as well as teaching them how to use SF, it's all about bringing in the daily things the daily challenges that we might face, as well as the other challenges that they are facing, such as domestic abuse, child to parent abuse, depression, blah, 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 as a case study, but also as case examples from me. And I do a lot of acting with them. So I pretend to be a child. How would you manage me? They can't manage me. I can't even manage myself. Joe hasn't managed me in 20 years. Never going to work. Never going to work. But we don't have long. So again, I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms. So imagine you've been asked to deliver a parent workshop. What would you ensure that you are covering, and how would you cover it? So you've got 10 minutes. I'm going to do this very quickly, and I'm going to recreate so it's a smaller room. So you're going to deliver a parent workshop. What would you cover and how would you do it? There you go, 10 minutes. So just like we asked any family that as at family-based solutions or in the parent workshops, was that conversation useful? And if it was, what was useful about it?
I'm just glad you couldn't hear what we were saying, Ayse, because you just
Are
thank God it was a breakout
you
room.
fighting over who's my number one?
Say.
Was that going on in the room?
Oh no.
Oh my God, Ayse.
Sorry,
I mean,
Jonas. Go on.
I mean, you're such an inspiration, and Joe too. You're doing amazing work, and there's so much to pick on. There's so many details. We don't have time. I'm sorry, but it's like there's so many things that are happening at the same time, and it would do a disservice in like picking out one because they're all kind of entwined. So the level of passion, you're direct, you're real, you're being real, and you're being honest, and you're being clear, and you're having fun. All that is happening at the same time, and you're really professional, and you're really strong for them. So I'm flabbergasted about what you're managing to do on those the connections that you're having with your clients and your families. It must be I'd love to be a fly on the wall, but I'm just getting a hint of it.
Dangerous.
today, and it's amazing. I'm just
So what difference do you think it makes to the parents that we can be all those things and not do too much planning and just go with the flow? And
I don't think you can work it
watch
the other
them.
way. My mission is to get away from models and structures and you know, because that doesn't work. It creates masks. It creates something to fall back on, and it's very convenient to have those kind of, oh, I'm using a technique, or here comes a question, but it doesn't work. You have to be there in the moment, and if you're not there in the moment, then that doesn't matter. Then nothing else matters, kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And I'm going to say this on SF24, so please no one take offense, but solution focus isn't the answer to everything.
No, of course not.
It's just not the answer to everything, because if you're truly client led, you have an open mind and go where they're taking you. You have solution focus elements. I listen with a solution focus ear at all times, but I may not ask the typical SF questions for weeks. It doesn't matter. It's learning to be in that moment, like you said, Jonas, I'm not going to say it's a skill, it needs practice, but we have to learn from our clients. You can go on training and you can read books and you can do everything under the sun and have all these CPD points and everything else. But if we're not learning from our clients, we're not great at what we do. And that is exactly what I believe. And if something goes wrong, what am I going to do differently? Because obviously that was my fault. I could have done that better. So what I've done, because this is a very, sorry, Martin, go on.
Well, I interrupted you. Finish what you were going to say.
No, go on. That's fine. Go on.
Well, I was going to say that listening to what you're talking about, what you're putting in the room with these people is humanity. So you're putting the common shared human condition. And although it's didactic, you know, they're there to learn something. They're learning in a way by example, or they're learning through a kind of shared humanity. And I think there's trust. There's trust in the room. You're winning their trust because you're sharing your own humanity with them. So, and I think it's a relaxed session. So that's very, very important. People are relaxed. And the kind of understanding here is that we're all human beings. We all face the same situations. So it is learning and it is didactic, but it's done in such a human way that you're inviting people into developing a sense of understanding, which they do readily, because the context is so warm and human.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only problem that I have with parent workshops is that I can't get rid of them because they keep booking on to more and more and more. And most of them can run it. I mean, one of the parents last night run half the session for me. I said, you know what I'm going to say, just go for it. I said, oh, are you sure? I said, just go for it. And she just went and spoke about the brain and little Brian in the brain. I was like, there you go. You did it. Well done. And so it's being able to form that sort of atmosphere is incredible for me. That was a very short snippet of what we do, so I really do apologize. I have put the link to Linktree in the chat for all information about family-based solutions and more, and contact details are all in that one link. But I will see you in the next session, hopefully. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.